Ballarat, 1982. A stonemason named Reg Coots stands at a bench in the old Sovereign Hill workshops, chisel in one hand, mallet in the other. He is carving a capital for a bank facade, the kind with acanthus leaves curling out of the stone like they grew there. It takes him 3 weeks. Nobody rushes him. The building he is working on will still be standing when his grandchildren are old men. That capital exists today. Nobody alive in Ballarat could carve its replacement. That is not a comment on talent. It is a comment on time, money, and what got broken along the way. This is the story of the buildings, the boats, the machines, and the furniture Australia used to make with its own hands, and why the country that built them would struggle to build them again. Before the causes, consider what this means for someone young today. A 19-year-old who wants to become a heritage stonemason in 2026 faces a strange problem. There is barely a course to enrol in. Trades bodies and TAFE providers describe commencements in heritage trades and traditional building crafts as a rounding error next to plumbing, electrical, or general carpentry. A young person with genuine hand skill and patience, the exact temperament this work demands, has almost nowhere formal to learn it. So they become a plasterer doing project home cornices, or a carpenter framing project homes. Competent trades, useful trades, but not the one that could have kept a 19th century town hall standing for another 100 years. Heritage Victoria and the New South Wales Heritage Council have both flagged traditional stonemasonry, ornamental plastering and heritage joinery as trades under strain, with an ageing workforce and too few apprentices coming through behind them. Industry estimates vary, and nobody publishes a single reliable national headcount. But tradespeople in the sector describe the pool of working heritage stonemasons as numbering only in the low hundreds nationally. A craft that once employed thousands in Melbourne and Sydney alone now fits, by some estimates, into a school hall. How did a country with sandstone quarries at Pyrmont, hardwood forests thick enough to build a navy, and generations of migrant tradesmen from Italy, Malta, and Britain end up here? Part of it is simple economics. Restoration work is slow and expensive, and councils facing tight budgets defer maintenance rather than pay for it properly. Part of it is education policy. The Dawkins reforms of 1988 folded colleges of advanced education into the university system and reordered how vocational training was funded and valued. TAFE funding was made contestable through the 1990s, and the apprenticeship pipelines that once carried heritage skills forward through master and apprentice arrangements on site were never properly rebuilt. Nobody set out to destroy the craft. It simply stopped being taught, one retirement at a time. It is worth remembering how deep those quarries once ran into daily life. The Pyrmont quarries alone supplied the stone for Sydney's town hall, the general post office, and countless bank chambers, and at their peak employed hundreds of quarrymen and masons working in relay, cutting and dressing stone that was carted by horse and later by rail to building sites across the city. Melbourne drew on bluestone from Footscray and Clifton Hill in much the same way. Whole suburbs of laneways and drains built from stone, quarried a few miles from where it was laid. That local, walkable relationship between quarry and building site has almost entirely gone. Much of the stone used in Australian restoration work now arrives from overseas, cut to specification by workers who never see the finished building. Here is a genuine complication in that story. Apprenticeship numbers overall are not in free fall. Bricklayer and stonemason apprenticeship starts rose sharply in the year to September 2024, part of a broader surge in trade commencements as housing targets pushed governments to fund trades training hard. That is real, and it matters. But almost none of that growth is heritage specific. It is production bricklaying and modern stonework for project homes, not lime mortar, carved capitals or dry stone walling. The tide is rising. It is not lifting this particular boat. The stonemasons are the visible edge of something bigger. Consider the shipwrights. Cockatoo Island in Sydney Harbour built destroyers and submarines by hand, riveted plate by plate, men reading the curve of a hull by eye, because the drawings only got you most of the way there. It launched cruisers during the First World War and destroyers during the Second, and through the middle of the 20th century, it trained generations of boilermakers, riveters, and shipwrights who learnt their trade the same way stonemasons did, by standing beside an older man for years before being trusted with the real work. Dockyard operations there ceased in the early 1990s, with the site fully shut soon after. The skills went with the last apprentices who trained there. When Australia went looking for shipbuilders again decades later for naval contracts, it had to import much of the expertise because the domestic pipeline had been broken for a generation. A nation that once built its own warships now negotiates with foreign yards for basic hull sections. Furniture making tells a quieter version of the same story. Australian cedar and blackwood cabinet making, the dovetailed drawers, the hand-cut mortise and tenon joints that needed no screws and no glue to hold for a century, has become a boutique pursuit rather than a mass industry. Red cedar, in particular, was cut almost to extinction along the northern rivers of New South Wales through the 19th century, precisely because it was so prized for fine furniture. And the timber that remains now commands prices that put traditional cabinet making out of reach for ordinary households. Import competition has squeezed domestic wooden furniture manufacturers hard over the past 5 years, and much of the volume market for cheap flat-pack pieces is now controlled by imports. Local manufacturers have responded by retreating into premium, custom-made work rather than competing on price, which has kept some workshops alive even as the mass market slipped away. Most furniture sold in Australia today is manufactured overseas and assembled at home with an Allen key. The lathe work, the hand finishing, the eye for grain that a master cabinet maker develops over 15 years on the job, survives now only in that narrow premium corner. Stop here for a moment and picture the workshop that remains. Not a factory floor, a single room, a lathe, sawdust on the boots, one older tradesman and maybe one apprentice, working to order for people who can pay for it properly. Every one of these crafts depended on a working life that barely exists in Australia anymore. Decades in one trade, one firm, sometimes one town, learning slowly under an older man who expected you to watch before you touched. The rise of subcontracting and gig-style trades, work from the 1990s onward, broke that rhythm. Workers moved between jobs under their own Australian business number, with little continuity and little incentive for any employer to invest 15 years training someone in a skill that outlasts the contract. Not every trend here is decline, and it is worth saying so plainly. Heritage trades bodies in Victoria and South Australia report a small but real uptick in interest from career changers in their late 20s and 30s, tradespeople who did their time in project home carpentry or bricklaying, and are now seeking out short courses in traditional lime mortarwork or heritage joinery through TAFE enterprise programs and private heritage academies. It is a trickle, not a pipeline, but it means the knowledge has not vanished completely. Somewhere in Goulburn and in Ballarat, small workshops are quietly training 6 or 8 people at a time. It will not rebuild an industry. It might keep one alive. The cost of losing these skills shows up in strange places. When a heritage-listed building needs urgent repair and no local tradesperson can do the specialist work, councils either pay high day rates to fly in the handful of remaining specialists, or they let the building decay until demolition becomes the cheaper option. Heritage assessors in regional New South Wales have flagged listed buildings as being at genuine risk because no qualified restoration mason could be sourced within a workable radius. A building that survived 2 world wars and the Depression can be lost in a decade because the trade that maintained it disappeared first. Think about what that means for a town like Marulan or Kalgoorlie with its grand gold rush era pubs and banks. These places built beautiful, permanent things because permanence was assumed. Men expected the building to outlive them, and they built accordingly because the trade to maintain it would always exist. That assumption no longer holds. A veranda post turned on a lathe from ironbark, the kind that takes a craftsman a full day and leaves splinters and sawdust caked into every crease of his hands, is now something a heritage carpenter has to be specially commissioned to reproduce, at a price that makes most owners choose composite instead. Modern construction favours speed and standardization. Prefabricated frames, engineered timber, machine-cut joints that need no skill to assemble, only to install. That is not automatically a bad thing. Housing needs volume, and volume needs speed. But it means the muscle memory of the old crafts, the feel of a loaded trowel dragging just right through fresh render on a hot day in Whyalla, how much water the sand needs before it holds a corner without slumping, is not being passed down. Nobody building at volume needs it anymore. The skill survives only where someone chooses, at real cost, to keep it alive. The pattern across every one of these trades is the same. A skill that took decades to master was not replaced by a better version of itself. It was replaced by nothing, because nobody built the pipeline to keep training people once the market for the old skill shrank. Contestable TAFE funding through the 1990s saw campuses close. Viet Day FEE help from 2009 burned billions on private operators that taught little and delivered less. None of these decisions targeted stonemasons or shipwrights specifically. They simply stopped replenishing the well that all trades, ordinary and extraordinary, drew from. A story like this deserves more than a passive audience. Subscribe to Old Australia. If this account of vanishing hands and vanishing trades means something to a family kitchen table, a father's toolbox, or a town that used to make things properly, 3 things are worth carrying out of this. First, craftsmanship does not disappear because people stop wanting beautiful, durable things. It disappears because nobody funds the slow, unglamorous work of teaching it to the next person. Second, a handful of these trades are being kept alive, barely, by small numbers of tradespeople who chose to go backwards into an old skill rather than forwards into a faster one. And that deserves more attention than it gets. Third, every heritage building still standing in an Australian country town is standing on borrowed time unless someone somewhere is being taught to maintain it properly. Somewhere out there is a viewer whose father or grandfather worked stone, timber or iron in a way nobody in the family does anymore. Old Australia wants to hear what that trade was, what town it was practiced in, and whether anyone still does it. Leave it in the comments. It will be read and it will be answered. Australia used to build things meant to outlast the men who made them. It is losing the hands that could keep that promise. Subscribe to Old Australia.